Good evening, you're listening to The Truth Tank and I'm your host, Tank. If it's your first time listening to The Truth Tank, a big welcome. If you're a repeat listener, welcome back. If you listened to the last episode I released, you would know that the Lie of Communism has been delayed. It's been pushed back till about mid-year due to a pretty big computer issue, which you can hear all about on the previous episode. I'm not going to go into it again because it makes me angry. It's also why there's been a bit of a gap in between episodes being released. Not like many people listen anyway, but I just thought I'd explain why there has been this gap in between the episodes. I was on a roll at the start of the year, getting them out pretty much weekly, and then the computer decided to shit itself. And I'm playing catch up, and this is another one of those episodes that was recorded before I was interrupted with this computer issue. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into tonight's episode. This episode is going to be about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline explosion, or sabotage, however you see it, that occurred in 2022. Was it an act of sabotage? I think it's pretty obvious that it was an act of sabotage, but by who and for what purpose is a little more mysterious. No one's claimed responsibility for the explosion or sabotage, whatever you want to call it. There's several candidates that could have been responsible for it or could have pulled it off, but I guess we'll never really know who was responsible. It's also a subject I don't know a lot about. I've saw the news reports when it first happened. I've heard it mentioned on various podcasts, but never really in depth, which is why I wanted to cover it. I've got 4 articles lined up for this episode. Each one is going to take a different perspective and differing point of view. Each of the articles involve a different country that was affected by the blast or sabotage, whatever you want to label it, and it has a very different perspective. Like I said, I don't know a huge amount about this, so I'm going to be finding out about the Nord Stream explosion the same time you are. So without further ado, let's dive headfirst into this. Could you call it a modern conspiracy? I think so. It definitely has some conspiratorial angles in it. It's got war and sabotage, economic ramifications, some espionage thrown in there. It's got all the elements for a good story, so let's have a deep and detailed dive into it. This is episode 71 of The Truth Tank, Explosions and Sabotage on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
Do you battle with things like anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses? Hey, me too. Come on over, we can be besties. My name is Mikey on Mute. Join me on my new podcast where I talk about mental health, breaking toxic masculinity, and opening up the conversation. You can find me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube under Mikey on Mute Podcast, where I'll tell you my story, as well as the stories of others, get perspective, and see where we can grow. Are you one of the cool kids that's on TikTok? Hey, me too. Search out Mikey on Mute to see show clips there as well. I really look forward to hearing your story and opening up the rest of this conversation. Talk to you soon.
So as I mentioned, I don't know a huge amount about the facts behind the pipeline explosion apart from what everybody knows, what we've heard on the news, read in the newspapers and articles, and heard on various podcasts. There's a lot of different angles to this. There's a conspiratorial angle, a cover-up angle, sabotage angle. It's got a whole bunch of different elements in the story. While it was a big event, it wasn't one that lasted too long in the news cycle, and I haven't heard too much about it since. It kind of came and went, and when you think about it, it was a pretty big event that was glossed over by a lot of media and has basically been hushed up and swept under the rug and nothing to tell here, move along, forget you even heard about it kind of a situation. So, the first article I found is on Reuters.com. It's going to give us some background to the explosion and what happened, some of the key facts. Then we'll have a look at some of the difference in opinion and perspective from several other countries. The article is called Nord Stream, What's Known About the Mystery Pipeline Explosions. Not explosion, explosions. Interesting. It's by, and I do apologize for butchering this name, Negus Adamantis, I think that's how you pronounce his name, and Johan Ahandler. I think that's how you pronounce it. It was published February 7th, 2024. Sweden announced on Wednesday that it had dropped its investigation into the explosions in 2022 on Nord Stream pipelines carrying Russian gas to Germany, and had handed evidence it had uncovered over to German investigators. Interesting. German interests do pop up quite a lot in this, and as I understand it, the pipelines supplied Germany with a majority of its natural gas. Even though we haven't gone too far into this, I think we can kind of rule out Germany as the culprit. Why would they sabotage their own pipeline? Especially in Europe, where you do rely on a lot of gas for heating. It does get pretty cold, and it is kind of vital for survival in countries that do get pretty cold. You cannot not have central heating and home heating, or you'll freeze to death. So I think the Germans could probably be taken off the board as the culprit. And before we get too far into the episode, this is a bit of a disclaimer. Most of this episode is going to be completely hypothetical. I'm not pointing the finger at any individual, government, military, country, nation state, bad actor, group, or criminal enterprise. I'm not pointing the fingers at anybody. I'm only throwing out hypothetical ideas and based on no factual evidence whatsoever. Just my own hypothetical thought. So back to the article. Here's what we know so far about the blasts, which destroyed 3 out of the 4 pipelines, hastening Europe's switch to other energy suppliers following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. No one has taken responsibility. Interesting paragraph. This obviously has a lot to do with the Russian and Ukrainian war. It's a Russian pipeline. Stands to reason they probably make quite a bit of money out of it. Is this just wartime sabotage by another nation? Say Ukraine. Did the Ukrainian army or navy deliberately sabotage the Russian pipeline to cause an economic impact on the Russians? Likely, but who the fuck knows? Because it would put a bit of a dent into the Russian economy, I'd imagine. But at the same time, that also has a negative effect on Germany, which is an ally of Ukraine, as far as I know. 3 out of the 4 were destroyed. Did they plan on blowing up all 4 of them? Why not 1 pipeline or 2? Why not just blow the whole lot of them up, all 4 of them? Why 3? What is Nord Stream? Nord Stream 1, NS1, and Nord Stream 2, NS2, each consisting of 2 pipes, were built by Russia's state-controlled Gazprom to pump 110 billion cubic meters of natural gas a year across the Baltic Sea to Germany. The 4 concrete-coated steel pipelines of about 1,200 kilometers, 750 miles in length, and more than 1 meter in diameter, lie at a depth of around 80 to 110 meters. Okay, it's not too deep. A decent diver shouldn't have too much of a problem reaching those type of depths. 1 string of NS2 pipeline remains intact. NS1 came on stream in 2012. NS2 was completed in September 2021 and filled with gas, but has never been commissioned. Okay, interesting. Germany cancelled its approval process days before Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, which put Europe's reliance on Russia's natural gas in the political spotlight. Interesting, did the Germans know something or predict that the Russians were going to invade? Because that seems like very good timing to cancel it only a few days before the invasion begun. But then again, why would Germany not want more natural gas? The pipeline seems to benefit Germany more than any other nation. Yes, it's controlled by Russia, but Germany has a lot of natural gas to lose if that relationship or pipeline is damaged, it would seem. Who owns the pipelines? Russia's Gazprom owns 51% of NS1 and 100% of NS2. Interesting, so who owns the other 48% of NS1? And if the pipeline that wasn't damaged is 100% owned by Germany, does the explosion of the sabotage even impact the Russian economy that badly? Because if they've still got the NS2 pipeline that's filled with gas, they can still sell that even if Germany's not buying. Everyone needs natural gas. Oh, like I mentioned before, was the original plan to blow up all 4 pipelines, and they only got 3, because it seems like the most important one, the most valuable one to Russia, is still intact. Interesting. Obviously, this is not based on anything. This is just me theorizing as I'm reading the article. Germany's E.ON and Wintershall DA, however you say that, have 15.5% of NS1, while French Ingi and Dutch Gasson, I'm fucking terrible at pronouncing things, especially European names, have 9% each. Alright, so there's a vested European interest in this pipeline. The one thing these countries have in common is they've supported Ukraine. I'm not sure about the Dutch, but the French have. I'm pretty sure the Germans have. So it does seem quite suspicious that those pipelines were destroyed and not so much the 100% Russian-owned one. It's starting to look very suspicious. The Western owners have written off all their investments since the explosion. Okay, so if they've written it off, they're obviously not making any more money, but they probably didn't lose a hell of a lot either. Well, they might have, but it probably was covered under insurance or some type of insurance tax loophole or something like that. Either way, I seriously doubt those companies would have lost too much money. I don't think any of them have gone bankrupt since, but I could be wrong. Like in most of these corporate kind of scenarios, it doesn't seem like the corporate entity that owns a percentage of this pipeline is going to be that adversely affected in the long run. While NS2 is fully owned by Gazprom, Western companies, British Shell, Germany's Wintershall DA, and Uniper, French Engine, and Austria's OMV covered 50% of the pipeline's total construction costs of about 11 billion. Ooh, that is a sizable figure. So these countries built the pipeline that is fully owned by Russia or supplied with the Russian gas. So in other words, I think the way I'm interpreting that is the Russians owned the gas that is housed in the pipeline owned by a conglomerate of Western European corporations and companies. Interesting. All 5 Western companies have written off their full financing of NS2, amounting to about 1 billion euros each. There have been no plans announced to repair the damage. Now we get to the good part. How were the pipelines damaged? On September 26, 2022, Swedish seismologists registered several blasts, some 17 hours apart, off the Danish island of Bornholm that ruptured 3 out of the 4 lines of the Nord Stream system, sending plumes of methane into the atmosphere. So I was under the impression that this happened in the Baltic Sea. I don't know what countries are around the Baltic Sea. I've got a rough idea of some of them. I didn't think Denmark was. So if that happened off the coast of a Danish island, wouldn't that be an act of sabotage or declaration of war or terrorism on Denmark? Seems a little dicey. You could start another conflict. But anyway, moving on. Gazprom said about 800 million cubic metres of gas, equivalent to about 3 months of Danish gas supplies, have escaped. It took several days for the gas to stop leaking. Yeah, fuck. Sweden has found traces of explosives on several objects recovered from the explosion site, confirming it was a deliberate act. I think it's pretty obvious it was a deliberate act. I don't think an accident would have blown up 3 pipelines. It might have fractured or blew a hole in one of them. But to blow 3 of them up like that, and obviously, there's the trace evidence of explosives found at the site, which obviously suggests foul play. But then again, thanks for pointing that out, Captain Obvious. And this is what surprises me the most about this story. There's a lot of European countries that have been adversely affected by this pipeline explosion, but no one seems to be doing anything about it, or they've done investigations, but they haven't really done much more than that. No one's really pointing the finger or blaming anybody, and it seems like they're kind of taking it lying down and, oh well, it happened, kind of move on. Even though it's caused, I'd say, at the bare minimum, a pretty big disruption in natural gas supplies. This is the kind of thing that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago would have started a world war. I guess these countries are probably trying to avoid that at all costs, especially European countries. I'm sure there's an investigation of some type going on by these countries, and they're obviously holding their cards very close to their chest. They probably have some information that they don't want out. Once again, that's just completely hypothetical. In July, Germany told the UN Security Council that it also found traces of subsea explosives on a sailing yacht, quote, that may have been used to transport the explosives. Interesting. It's probably a safe deduction to make. How did the traces of explosives get to be on this sailing yacht? Was this yacht commandeered or hired by some type of special forces or a mercenary team to carry out this job? It's very sus, and it's starting to sound like a plot of a Bond film. Germany has confirmed its investigation. Investigators raided a ship identified by German media as a 50-foot, 15-metre long sailing yacht in January last year that may have been used to transport the explosives used to blow up the pipeline. The boat, leased in Germany via a Poland-registered company, contained traces of octagon, the same explosive that was found at the underwater blast site, according to investigations by Germany, Denmark and Sweden. I don't think you have to be Sherlock Holmes to put two and two together and work out that the yacht has obviously come into contact with the same explosive that blew up the pipeline. Therefore, that yacht was probably used to transport the explosives to the side of the pipeline in order to blow it up. Germany told the UN that it was possible for trained divers to attach explosives to the pipelines laying at about 70 to 80 metres deep where explosions occurred. It's pretty obvious. I think most special forces teams or Navy demolition teams could probably pull that off pretty easily. I mean, isn't that the whole point of underwater demolition? The UDT teams, I think they're called in the Navy SEALs, isn't that pretty much their bread and butter, is underwater sabotage and demolition? I'd imagine some of those experienced UDT teams could probably do that pretty easily. It'd probably be like practice. It's in an area of water where it doesn't look like there's too much military presence or too much security going on. I mean, obviously there's security because there's a giant pipeline, but it's not like it was some ultra-fortified underwater facility with laser trip mines and motion sensor trackers at every 30 centimeters or whatever. It kind of sounds like they've just taken a sailing boat, gone there, blown it up, fucked off, because they only found the boat a couple of months later. So it seems pretty likely that a decent underwater demolition team could probably pull this off pretty easy. I think Jocko Willink was asked that question. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he said something along the lines of, yeah, absolutely, it wouldn't be that hard. It'd take about 15 minutes. Who is behind the explosions? Some US and European officials initially suggested Moscow had blown up its own pipelines, an interpretation dismissed as, quote, idiotic by Russian President Vladimir Putin. You can see why they would, but also doesn't make a lot of sense because it's billions of dollars worth of their natural gas. Instead, Putin has blamed, quote, Anglo-Saxons, using Kremlin's terms for the US and Britain without providing evidence. It has also blamed Ukraine. All three countries deny any role. That's a pretty obvious one. Any country that is blamed for an event like that is, of course, they're going to deny any involvement, whether they had anything to do with it or not. All parties are going to point the finger at each other, but of course they're all going to deny it. The White House last year dismissed a blog post by a US investigative journalist alleging Washington was behind explosions as, quote, utterly false and complete fiction. The US and German media have reported that a yacht could have been used by a Ukrainian or pro-Ukrainian group, citing leaked intelligence reports and people familiar with official investigations. Kyiv has reportedly denied any involvement. If I was a betting man, I'd kind of lean towards US, Ukrainian, or Russian involvement. I think they're probably the most likely culprits. Pro-Ukrainian group. That could be a CIA-backed group. It may be made up of Ukrainians or foreigners, who the fuck knows. I think what is obvious is it would take a certain group or individual with a very select set of skills, namely underwater demolition, scuba diving, that kind of thing, to pull something like this off, which would narrow the list of culprits to a very select few. Hypothetically speaking, there's a very small and select group of people that could pull something like this off. And let's face it, you have to have some type of military experience, which would point the finger at either, hypothetically again, US, Russia or Ukraine, or a pro-Ukrainian group, which could be any of the ABC agencies, any Merc group financed by an ABC agency or some other individual or nation, who the fuck knows. How might an attack have been carried out? In November last year, the Washington Post reported that Roman Chervinsky, a former intelligence official who served in the Ukrainian military special forces, managed the 6-person team but did not plan the attack. He denied involvement. Where is the Washington Post getting that information from? They'd have to have a pretty credible source to publish something like that, but then again, it's modern day newspapers. There seems to be no responsibility for publishing or claiming anything about anybody. If they've reported that Mr. Chervinsky managed this 6-person team, what proof do they have? They say he managed the team, but he did not plan the attack. Where's that information coming from, and why him? The Post said Chervinsky took orders from senior Ukrainian officials who ultimately reported to Commander-in-Chief General, I apologise for the pronunciation, but I'm definitely going to get this name wrong, Valery Zalyakhizny. I think that's how it's pronounced. Reuters was unable to verify the report independently. Zalyakhizny has made no public comment. Germany's Der Spiegel and ZDF have said that the group of 6 people, 5 men and 1 woman, boarded Andromeda in Rostock, Germany on September the 6th, using forged passports, and returned to Rostock on September 23. The Andromeda is the name of the yacht that was found to have explosive residue on it. Yeah, anyone could be responsible for this at this point. You have the Washington Post putting out this story, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence suggesting that the Ukrainians were behind it. So, where the fuck are they getting this information from? The yacht was spotted at a small Danish island of Kristinaso near the explosion site on September 16 to 18 and made a short stop at a marina in Kolbelzerg, Poland on September 19th before returning to Germany. Poland said in January it has been cooperating with allies in a probe into the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines. There was no evidence to suggest that Poland was used as a hub for the sabotage, Polish prosecutors said that last year. Interesting. What did Western intelligence know about the attack? A day after the explosions on September 27, 2022, the German magazine Der Spiegel wrote that the CIA had warned Germany in summer 2022 about possible attacks on the Baltic Sea pipelines. The Washington Post, citing leaked information posted online, wrote last June that the United States learned of a Ukrainian plan to attack the Nord Stream natural gas pipelines 3 months before they were damaged. Interesting. Is this a case of the CIA playing both sides, or appearing to put this information out there in order to stop an attack, but really are they funding it behind the scenes? I don't know. It's just a hypothetical line of inquiry. Does seem interesting that they did know about it 3 months beforehand, but nothing was done about it. The intelligence report was based on information provided by a source in Ukraine, the Post said, adding the CIA shared it with Germany and other European countries in June 2022. Dutch national broadcaster, NOS, reported the same month that the tip came from the Dutch military intelligence agency, MIVD. According to the Post, the CIA relayed to, here's his name again, Zelensky. I'm just going to call him Zal if his name pops up again. Through an intermediary that the United States opposed such an operation. Reuters was unable to verify the reports independently. End of article. Very interesting. That reads like a plot from a Bond film or a espionage novel of some type. There's a lot of international espionage going on in there, and it's no clearer to solving the mystery of who blew up the pipelines. Was it the US? Was it the Ukrainians? Was it the Russians? Was it the Danes? The Germans? Who knows? They're all pointing the finger at one another. If that report from the CIA is true, then I guess we can take them off the board as well, based on a logical line of inquiry. And it does kind of look like the Ukrainians were behind it. Once again, completely hypothetical, but interesting nonetheless. So, what do you think? Was it the CIA? Was it a pro-Ukrainian, maybe ABC agency-backed group? Was it the Russians? Was it the Germans? Was it the Danes? Was it the United States government? Or was it a group of Arctic penguins? Who the fuck knows? Diving a little deeper into the Ukrainian perspective, I found an article on theguardian.com titled "Ukrainian Team Blew Up Nord Stream Pipeline, Claims Report." Yeah, very interesting. The headline has my attention. It's by Sean Walker, Central and Eastern European correspondent, published Thursday, the 15th of August, 2024. Alright, this should be good. Spokesperson for Volodymyr Zelensky denies WSJ claims and again accuses Russia of carrying out sabotage. Interesting. I guess the big question that has to be asked is who stands to gain or lose the most from this pipeline being destroyed. And obviously there's a lot of sanctions placed on Russia, so you would think that protecting the pipeline would be in their best financial interests if they are having a lot of tariffs and embargoes placed on their imports and exports. The pipeline doesn't seem to be affected by that. Germany needs to buy the gas from somewhere. Russia has the supply. Therefore, it does seem pretty stupid that they would sabotage their own cash pipeline in this case, especially given the tariffs and the restrictions placed on their international trading. The Nord Stream gas pipeline was blown up by a small Ukrainian sabotage team in an operation that was initially approved by Volodymyr Zelensky and then called off, but which went ahead anyway, according to claims in a report in the Wall Street Journal. Okay, very interesting. Once again, like the Washington Post, where the fuck did they get this information from? Where did this supposed leaked report come from? How did they come by this report in the first place? I don't think it's too far-fetched to imagine that Zelensky or one of his Ukrainian generals has probably put forward an idea like this at some point. I mean, it's war. Sabotage is a big part of that. It shouldn't seem that secretive that one side has thought about sabotaging the other side, and obviously the Ukrainians are more motivated to do this than anybody else. A spokesperson for the Ukrainian president has denied the claims. Yeah, I'm not surprised on that either. The pipeline, consisting of the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines, carried natural gas from Russia to Germany under the Baltic Sea. It was damaged by explosions on September 22nd, 7 months after Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, putting it out of action and worsening an energy crisis in Europe. All through Europe, there's been a big push to go green and to tax petrol or gas-powered cars in favour of electric vehicles. There seems to be a huge push, mostly in like Britain and places like that. Don't quote me on it, I'm not an expert on it, but this is just what I've heard on podcasts and throughout the news. There seems to be this push to go green at kind of any cost. Is this just a very elaborate cover to try to push that process along? Are certain companies going to make a lot of money by doing so? It wouldn't be on the top of my usual suspects list, but it can't be ruled out completely. It's during wartime, so it's probably not the biggest priority, given all the millions of tons of explosives and oil that's being blown up and pumped into the atmosphere. The environment and green energy doesn't really seem to be too high on anyone's agenda. Not to mention the millions of tons of CO2 and greenhouse gases that were released by the methane explosion itself. I heard a report that more CO2 was released in that explosion than throughout the Jurassic, Cretaceous period up until the modern day, or something like that. If it was environmentally focused, it's a very weird and bizarre way to show it. And not to mention the strain it puts on European energy providers. That's going to affect a lot of people, especially in Germany and places around Europe that rely on this energy for heating and cooking. Power prices are going to go up, there's going to be shortages, people are going to freeze. Probably not going to be the best scenario for winter. Initially, many assumed Russia was to blame. Later, others suggested the CIA could have been involved. Last year, the New York Times reported that US officials had seen intelligence suggesting a pro-Ukrainian group was behind the explosions, while last month, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban called the explosions, quote, an act of terrorism carried out at the obvious direction of the Americans. Okay, so there's a lot of fingers being pointed at the US and the CIA. Once again, another newspaper, this time the New York Times, claiming a mystery report suggests that a pro-Ukrainian group was behind it. Like I said before, where's the report coming from? How do they get it? Is the information reliable? Is it credible? Is it just made up or put out there by the Russians? Who the fuck knows? Anyone really could be involved. Everyone has something to lose and something to gain by it. According to the WSJ, the sabotage operation involved a small sailing boat and a team of 6 people, a combination of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians with relevant expertise. As I suggested before, that would limit that group to a very small number of people who could pull that off. I'm pretty sure the WSJ, Wall Street Journal, was the same report from the last article, pointing the finger at the Ukrainians. The operation used private funding but was directed by a serving army general who reported to Ukraine's then Commander-in-Chief, Valery Zhao. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name again. Zelensky approved the plan but later backtracked after the CIA found out about it and asked Kiev to call it off, according to the WSJ's sources. Nonetheless, Zhao pressed ahead with the mission, the report claims. Zhao, now Ukraine's ambassador to the UK, told the WSJ he knew nothing about the operation and called the allegations, quote, a mere provocation. Interesting, and of course he's going to deny it. At the same time, his name is mentioned in this report. And I'll say it again, where does the report come from? Where does this information come from? Can it be trusted? But it's seeming a little suspicious that this dude's name keeps popping up. And once again, it's not any clearer than it was before. Anyone could really be involved. And if the CIA had asked Kiev to not go ahead with it, there was probably a good reason. It just seems insane that something like that did happen. My biggest concern with the pipeline sabotage is just how much greenhouse gas was released at one time. Is that going to come back to bite the human race collectively in 10 years' time? Is it just another storm planet Earth has to weather because of human greed and ignorance? I don't think too much thought went into the environmental or ecological impact such an explosion would have. Ukraine has always denied involvement in the explosion, and on Thursday, a spokesperson for Zelensky again accused Russia of carrying out the sabotage. Quote, such an act can only be carried out with extensive technical and financial resources, and who possessed all of this at the time of the bombing? Only Russia. Mikhailo Podolak told Reuters. I think there's other groups that would have the technical expertise and financial resources to pull that off, the US being the obvious one. Russia, obviously. From the previous report, it sounds like Ukraine also had the technical and financial resources to pull it off. The WSJ report claims the operation was financed privately. It wouldn't be hard to find a couple of millionaires sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause to finance the operation. Fuck, the CIA could have done it. Anyone could have done it. Elon Musk could have done it. I'm not saying he's involved, but anyone. Really, how much money would it cost? You could probably get that done for a couple of million. You're obviously not paying a merc team. There seems to be, the report claims it was Ukrainian soldiers and civilians with that expertise. It mentioned 5 male, 1 female. If I was a betting man, I'd probably say the female crew member was the civilian expert that was brought on to either oversee or provide some type of technical expertise or knowledge on the operation. I dare say this person might be a diver. She may have even worked on the pipeline's construction or other underwater facilities. Who the fuck knows? Maybe she's a former Navy diver, rescue diver. The possibilities are endless in this story. Now, actually, come to think of it, this would make a really good espionage spy film. like a John le Carre kind of style mystery. Who's responsible for the pipeline explosion? Is it this guy, or this guy? Just when you think you've got one culprit figured out, a bit of evidence suggests someone else, and then you left running around in circles, not knowing who's responsible, who's telling the truth, who's lying out of their ass, or who might be responsible. Looking at a map of the pipelines, I didn't actually know the Baltic Sea went through so many countries. The pipeline pretty much goes from the tip of Germany all the way through the middle of the Baltic Sea, past Sweden, past Finland, and into the tip of Russia. Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 both intersect about the midway point of Sweden. The boundaries of national economic zones is kind of just below the center point. The map points out where the explosion took place, which is very curious. That Bornholm Island is a few miles off the tip of Sweden. The seismic activity was picked up on the edge of the pipeline closest to Sweden, which seems like a very unusual spot. But then again, I suppose if it was up too high into Russia, you'd have the Russian Navy to deal with and be a bit obvious. The explosion takes place pretty close to Germany, which I was a little surprised about. Like I said at the start of it, I don't know too much about this story at all, apart from the basic facts. But interesting, it happens very close to Germany and Poland. It's a fair way from Ukraine. Ukraine would have to cross through Poland or somewhere to actually get to the Baltic Sea. There's a lot of rivers that run through that area, so you could probably take a small boat or yacht pretty far into it, I'd imagine. Interesting. Definitely look at this map and see what you think. Other Ukrainian agencies also denied governmental involvement. A senior official from the SBU, Ukrainian's security service, told the Wall Street Journal that Zelensky, quote, did not approve the implementation of any such actions on the territory of third countries and did not issue relevant orders, end quote. Are they just covering their ass because, like I just said about where the explosion actually occurred, that's, I suppose that would be technically German and Polish waters. So would that mean the Ukrainians are conducting an act of sabotage or war in a third and fourth country's waters? And what would be the potential political ramifications for that? Because these countries are big allies to Ukraine in the war effort against Russia. So it seems like if anyone did pull this off, whether it was ordered by the president or a general or a rogue element in the military or whatever, they'd have to be very certain of the outcome, and they'd have to be even more certain that this wasn't going to trigger another war. And that evidence of your involvement is never going to see the light of day, because this could have some dramatic geopolitical impacts, especially for the future of that part of Europe. Very interesting and concerning. And of course, Zelensky is going to deny it, but it doesn't change the fact that he did authorize it, they went back on it. So is that kind of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge? Yeah, call it off, wink, wink, but really they mean carry on. And that explosion happens in the Polish-German waters, more so the Polish side. Did they seek permission through any government to do this? I get from the reports from other countries, that doesn't sound like that was the case, but who the fuck knows what to believe. Very interesting that, quote, did not approve the implementation of any such actions on a territory or third countries. However, German police and prosecutors are reportedly pressing on with an investigation that is now homing in on senior Ukrainian military officials and could prove embarrassing for Berlin, given that it involves an ally launching an act of sabotage against key infrastructure. And that is a bit of a pickle the Germans are finding themselves in. If they investigate this and it does turn up that the Ukrainians were involved, like the article said, that's an ally basically committing an act of sabotage against their key infrastructure, and what could be the possible ramifications for that. It also means if it happened once, it can happen again. And we'll have a look at the German side of the argument in the next article. On Wednesday, it emerged that German authorities have issued a European arrest warrant for a man identified as Volodymyr Z. Okay, interesting. Volodymyr Zelensky. Is that a little clue of who authorised this? I don't know, purely hypothetical. Waldemir Z, a diving instructor who lived in Poland and is alleged to have dived down to the seabed to place the devices on the pipeline. The plot thickens once again. Polish prosecutors confirmed they had received a European arrest warrant for a man suspected for involvement in the Nord Stream attack. Quote, ultimately, Waldemir Z was not detained, as he left the territory of Poland at the beginning of July this year, crossing the Polish-Ukraine border, prosecutors said in a statement. Very interesting. Roderick Queisbeder, a member of the opposition CDU, who serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee of the German Parliament, urged caution about the allegations raised in the Wall Street Journal report. He told German radio there were, quote, intensive interests in letting all the clues lead back to Ukraine, warning that this could be, quote, part of the disinformation. Okay, so there's another layer of this, the disinformation. Who would want to frame Ukraine as the culprit? One, the Russians would. Could the US also want to point the finger at Ukraine because they do seem like the obvious and most motivated candidate to do something like this? Did the Russians blow up their own pipeline to frame the Ukrainians to wane some of the global support for them? I don't know, I think that one sounds a bit far-fetched for my liking. I think Russia has way too much at stake and way too much to lose. The obvious one being a massive amount of money generated by the sale of all that natural gas. Once again, where did he get this information from? Where did the Wall Street Journal get this information from? Where did it come from? Has it been verified by anybody? But very interesting, his comments. Intensive interests are letting all the clues lead back to Ukraine. It could be part of the disinformation. Yeah, interesting. Weirder things have happened in war to discredit the enemy. So, yeah, this is just a modern example of that taken to the absolute extreme. He said there continued to be, quote, an extensive amount of murkiness, and I think that's 100% right. This case is very murky, and not a lot of it makes sense. Surrounding the case, and that it could not be ruled out that this was, quote, a false flag operation. The plot thickens again. An attempt to push the blame onto Ukraine. He added that the pipelines had only been destroyed, quote, once it was clear that the gas would never flow through them again. Interesting, and unfortunately that's the end of the article. That was just getting good. Once it was clear that the gas would never flow through them again. So it sounds like they're being destroyed in a way that would make them impossible to repair given the current circumstances, i.e. a time of war, especially for the Russians, and can't exactly just send a repair crew down there, not with everything that's going on. So that's very interesting. And false flags are nothing new. They've been used throughout history to get countries and nations and groups into conflicts for various reasons. So is this just the same thing? Is this a false flag attack to blame Ukraine, to make them, I don't know, look bad or whatever? But then again, is that actually going to work? This is 2 years on and nothing much has happened. And it's not like the entire world is just going to not like Ukraine. They were invaded by another country. And most people probably haven't even heard of the Nord Stream explosions. I think there would have been much easier and safer ways to conduct a false flag. So let's dig a little deeper into some of these reports. I found this on the securitycouncilreport.org. It's a statement on the pipeline sabotage. It's titled The Nord Stream Incident Opening Briefing. This is like an official report about the incident. It's not too long, but it does provide a lot of information and background. I'll just skip over some of the parts we've already been through. Opening briefing. Tomorrow morning, 4th of October, the Security Council will convene for an open briefing under the, quote, Threats to International Peace and Security agenda item. Russia requested the meeting to mark the 2-year anniversary of the 26th of September 2022 explosions that caused physical damage to the Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic Sea. Uncharacteristically for a council briefing, no briefers are anticipated. Background. Nord Stream is a set of offshore natural gas pipelines. We know that, yada yada yada. Nord Stream 1 and 2. They run from Russia to Germany through the Baltic Sea. Between the 26th and 29th of September, leaks were detected in NS1 and 2 near the island of Bornholm in Denmark. The leaks occurred in international waters within the economic zones of Denmark and Sweden. Following the incident, Danish, German, and Swedish officials launched separate investigations into the leaks. Russia expressed interest in joining the investigations, citing concerns that the leaks may have been a deliberate act of terrorism. For background, see 7th of November 2023, What's in Blue story. And What's in Blue relates to the Security Council. There's a little box in the side of the screen about What's in Blue that explains what they are. When the Security Council approaches the final stage of negotiating a draft resolution, the text is printed in blue. What's in Blue is a series of insights on involving Security Council actions designed to help interested UN readers keep up with what might soon be, quote, in blue. Okay, interesting. So this is obviously the official United Nations Security Council report, if you haven't already figured that out. Interesting that Russia either hasn't or wasn't allowed to conduct their own investigation. And I mean, after all, it is their gas, so why don't they have the right to investigate their own economic interests? In a 21st of February 2023 letter to the Council, Denmark, Germany, and Sweden noticed that the investigations established that, quote, powerful explosions due to sabotage caused the damage to the pipelines. On the 18th of November 2022, Swedish authorities reported that the, quote, foreign items containing explosive residue were found near the site. In February, Danish and Swedish authorities informed the Council that they had closed their respective investigations, citing insufficient grounds to pursue a criminal case. That's interesting because in one breath they say they've found evidence and residue and stuff like that, but then they're saying they don't have enough grounds to pursue a criminal case. Now, is it just a cut and dry scenario that they just don't have enough physical evidence to point the finger at anyone? Or do they have enough physical evidence but they don't want to push it because of the political and economic ramifications of it? Because the word terrorist and sabotage is being thrown around a lot. It just seems if this was any other circumstances, they would have thrown all resources at it to try to find out who was responsible and to bring them to justice and make them pay for it. But this just seems to be like they found little bits of information here and there, but they don't want to look too hard. They don't want to look in the dark corners of the room in case they find that smoking gun that points to a suspect they don't really want to look into. But hypothetically, that's just how I'm interpreting it. But I could also be 100% wrong. In June, according to media reports, German authorities issued an arrest warrant for Zal, a Ukrainian driving instructor suspected of involvement in the Nord Stream explosions. You can skip over that. Poland has apparently rejected such accusations. A German investigator subsequently accused Poland of failing to execute the arrest and search warrants, alleging obstruction of the investigation. Poland has apparently rejected such accusations at a 14th of September police event in Prenzlau, Germany. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz reportedly referred to the explosion as a terrorist attack. In August, the Wall Street Journal, citing unnamed sources, published an article claiming that the Nord Stream explosions were ordered by Zal, then Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, yada yada yada. Referring to this article in a 16th of August letter to the Security Council, Russia argued that, quote, media reports leave no doubt that the German authorities have some information to share with the international community. In response, Denmark, Germany, and Sweden sent a letter to the Council on the 9th of September, emphasizing that, quote, media reports do not replace the investigations, which require confidentiality. That's also very convenient. It sounds like they know something, but they just don't want to tell anybody what it is because it sounds like they may have proof of who was behind it, and they don't want to make a big issue an even bigger one. That's what it looks like to me anyway. The letter also noted that Germany's investigations are ongoing and continue to be conducted impartially, independently, and in line with fundamental principles of the rule of law. And whenever anyone says that, you know they're hiding something. In March, the Russian foreign minister sent notes verbalis to the Moscow embassies of Denmark, Germany, Sweden, and Switzerland, alleging non-compliance with their obligations under the 97 International Convention for the Suspension of Terrorist Bombings and the 99 International Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism. Russia has soon filed pre-trial claims against the four countries. The dispute is apparently in the pre-trial resolution stage. If the issue is not resolved through the process, however, Moscow has signalled its intention to appeal to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I guess in this circumstance, Russia does have a right to know that who, I suppose, blew up the pipeline and why these investigations seem to have stalled and don't seem to be going anywhere despite some evidence being turned over. So does that take Russia off the board of likely culprits? There's only a few names still on there, or are they just basically covering their ass because they don't want the finger of blame being pointed back at them? I don't know. It's a very confusing and murky situation. The Security Council has engaged on the Nord Stream issue several times since the September 2022 incident. Russia first conveyed a Security Council briefing on the 30th of September 2022, during which Assistant Secretary General of Economic Development in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA, Navid Hanif, noted that the UN was, quote, not in a position to verify or confirm any of the reported details related to the incident. Interesting, but doesn't sound like that's going to be very helpful. And it sounds like that's going to probably piss off Moscow even more. On the 27th of March 2023, the Council voted on a draft resolution on the Nord Stream incident. The draft text, prepared by Russia and co-sponsored by several UN member states, condemned the act of sabotage on NS1 and 2 and requested the Secretary General to establish an international independent commission to investigate the incident. The draft resolution failed to be adopted because it did not garner the requisite support, having received 3 votes in favour, Brazil, China and Russia, and 12 abstentions. Interesting. That's no surprise either. Russia's not exactly the good guy at the moment, and anything that would benefit them would probably not be looked on favourably by these councils. But at the same time, I mean, don't they have a right to know? They're trying to get to the bottom of this investigation, and no one seems to want to look too hard into it, because I guarantee if this happened at a different point in history, one where the country wanting this information and these investigations to be carried out didn't invade another country, no matter what side of that story you believe, I think the council would have a different answer. They would be sparing no expense or resources to look into it. If this was the United States, I don't think they would be putting up as much of a fight, and they'd want to get to the bottom of it. It just seems like it's a different story because Russia's involved. Tomorrow's meeting. At tomorrow's meeting, Russia is expected to criticise what it perceives as reluctance by German authorities to share information about their investigation. Yeah, I can see that. It doesn't look like authorities wanted to share what they have found. During a press briefing on the 20th of September, Russian Foreign Minister spokesman Maria Zakharova accused Berlin of withholding information from the Security Council. She further claimed that the US and its partners blocked the adoption of the draft presidential statement proposed by Russia in October 23. It seems that the negotiations on the latest Russian proposed presidential statement have been challenging. While some members expressed support for the initiative, several council members have raised concerns about the text, arguing that it could undermine Germany's ongoing national investigations. Members are currently discussing the 4th draft of the text. Tomorrow's council members are likely to underscore that critical civilian infrastructure must be protected, while some may emphasise the need to ensure accountability for the Nord Stream incident. At the Council's last briefing on the issue on the 26th of April, China called for the launch of a UN-led international investigation. Algeria, noting its 3 gas pipelines to Europe, expressed support for the ongoing German investigation and for any future international effort, particularly under the auspices of the UN. Yeah, interesting. I guess if you are a country that has a pipeline in it, you probably are pretty concerned that you could be next to be sabotaged. Hypothetically, again, let's say Russia lost enough money. What if they sabotaged, another pipeline somewhere? So their reserve lots of gas were the only ones available for purchase. It seems like a lot of countries are backing the German-led investigation, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It doesn't seem like the information's getting out. So what's the point of investigating something that the UN Council or the public are never going to be privy to anyway? And it kind of sounds like they want to deliberately cover it up for whatever reason, so whoever's really responsible isn't found. It does seem a bit sus that there's a lot of independent investigations, but they don't really seem to be going anywhere. And yeah, why isn't the UN doing their own private investigation or leading a multinational investigation into this? It is very sus. While Russia may argue that the ongoing German investigations do not diminish the need for an impartial international investigation into the incident, several members are expected to emphasize the importance of the Council avoiding actions that could politicize the issue, interfere with or delegitimize national proceedings, or prejudge their outcomes. Interesting. Some council members, including the P3, France, the UK and the US, may criticise Russia for convening tomorrow's meeting. At the 26th of April briefing, the US accused Russia of using these meetings, quote, to spread disinformation, cast aspirations and discredit ongoing national investigations. The US also highlighted what it described as a double standard, noting that while Russia calls for an international investigation into the Nord Stream incident, it vetoed a 28th of March draft resolution that would have extended the mandate for the panel of experts assisting the 1718 Democratic People's Republic of Korea DPRK Sanctions Committee. Similarly, the UK said that, quote, it is hypocritical of Russia to spend so much time drawing the Security Council's attention to one act of sabotage and national infrastructure, while at the same time it is deliberately and systematically conducting its own attacks on national infrastructure in Ukraine. Yeah, I think they might have them with that. They're destroying large areas of Ukrainian cities, which is public infrastructure, yet they want a lot of resources to go into looking into a couple of meters of blown up pipeline. Well, more than a couple of meters, but you get what I'm saying. Yeah, is it purely just disinformation and distraction that they want to take the eyes off of what's happening in Ukraine? You can't really trust anything these countries are saying. They've all got their own agendas and they're all playing their own games. Russia does seem to veto a lot of stuff and derail a lot of plans the UN have, but at the same time, do they have a right to look into the cause of the sabotage? Yeah, I think so. And the fact that this information isn't getting out there isn't doing much more to probably sway the Russians that this wasn't an act of sabotage. A few things that were interesting that were omitted from that Security Council report. There's no mention of Ukrainian saboteurs, or if there is, they're very much played down. And no mention of could the US be involved. I'm not saying they are, I'm just saying it seems to be a pretty black and white, this Security Council report, and I don't know too much about these Security Council reports. Obviously, I'm not on them. Have they gone through every investigation and piece of information, filtered it out, got rid of all the bullshit, and just compile the relevant factual information that is 110% relevant to the case? Have they got rid of all the bullshit conspiracy theories and smaller investigations that didn't really lead anywhere, or evidence that doesn't go past the theoretical stage? I don't know. It sounds like they probably have, but it's interesting that certain things aren't mentioned in it. They do mention the Ukrainian sabotage plot and the residue found, but it doesn't go much further than that. They also don't mention the CIA warning them about a possible attack on the pipelines 3 months before it happened. So with all the information and reports that have gone on about the pipeline sabotage, You think we'd be getting a clearer picture of who and what is responsible, but I don't know about you, but I think I'm more confused now than I was when I thought this was just the Ukrainians or the Russians blowing up the pipeline. It doesn't seem like we're ever going to find out who did it, and it sounds like there is a very concerted effort to suppress the information and evidence that has come to light. Whether this be through the UN Council, the German investigation, maybe they just don't want to tell the Russians, but it does seem like there is a very real effort to suppress certain information coming to light and being made public. No one wants to take responsibility for it, and it's probably not going to be the last act of civilian sabotage we see during this war, or any war for that matter. Like in the closing statements of the Security Council report, Russia's done a pretty good job of destroying civilian infrastructure on a pretty much weekly basis in Ukraine. So why should they be so concerned about an investigation onto a single piece of civilian infrastructure that they have a financial investment in? Very interesting, very disturbing, and very conspiratorial. I always find it fascinating. I've said this many times before. When you meet someone and they say, "Oh, I don't believe in conspiracies, it's all bullshit." Conspiracies happen every single fucking day. This is one of them. While it's not an obvious conspiracy, it does seem like there are some conspiratorial parts of this. Like there is, it seems like there is a very real effort to cover up certain information and to stop it from coming out, because I think if that information does come out, it will point the finger to a singular source. And this is hypothetically speaking. This is my opinion only. I'm not basing this on anything. I think the most likely culprit is the 6-man Ukrainian demolition team. As cliche as that sounds, I think they are probably the ones responsible for it. They're the ones most motivated to destroy this pipeline. I don't think the Russians were responsible, but hey, stranger things have happened. And look, I'm 100% for Ukraine. I got Ukrainian listeners. I've had Ukrainian listeners for a while, going back several years to nearly 2020. I'm all in support of Ukraine, and I think there is a lot of shit that has been left out, like these reports, to push a certain narrative. I don't think the Russians are completely evil either. I don't think anyone is 100% evil or 100% good. I think there's goodies and baddies on both sides, and I do not view the world in black and white. I have stated time and time again, there's varying shades of grey. Are there elements in the Russian government that act nefarious and in their own interests? Yes, of course. Have there been some dodgy Ukrainian generals who have been involved in selling donated US weapons on the black market? Yes. It's a very, a very murky and a very complex topic, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It's been going on since 2014. I don't think it's a straightforward story with a straightforward answer. Unfortunately, I don't want to see war of any type, no matter who it involves. I think we should just learn to get along, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen. Right, it's time to move along and look at our final article from the Russian perspective. This is from AlJazeera.com, titled Russia's Lavrov says clear that US ordered 2022 Nord Stream blasts. We've heard the for and against for the Ukrainians being responsible, the Russians being responsible, and now the US being responsible. As I just mentioned, this article is from AlJazeera.com. It doesn't seem to have a author or a date, so I'll just get into it. Foreign Minister doubles down on long-held Russian theory after reports that German prosecutors issued arrest warrant for Ukrainian man. That is the alleged Ukrainian agent that stayed in Poland for a short time before moving back to Ukraine. So there is an article date. The article was published 19th of August 2024, but I don't see a author. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that it is clear the United States ordered the 2022 attacks on the Nord Stream gas pipelines. Interesting. What's he basing that statement on? Can he be trusted to tell the truth? What evidence does he have to suggest the US is solely responsible? I'm not sure. but that hopefully this article will help clear that up. His comments followed reports that German prosecutors have issued an arrest warrant for a Ukrainian man over the blasts on the pipelines which carried Russian gas to Germany under the Baltic Sea. The Wall Street Journal reported the explosions were carried out by a Ukrainian crew and approved by Kyiv's then military commander-in-chief. And that is the guy I referred to before. And so far, most, if not all of these articles have said pretty much the same thing, that it was a small Ukrainian team and it was this Ukrainian guy that has the arrest warrant out for him who was responsible for planting the explosives on the pipelines. The logical conclusion to all of this would suggest that it was a small Ukrainian team responsible for the attack. That's what the reports are saying, and that seems to be what the evidence suggests. But then again, where did the Wall Street Journal get the report from? How factual is it? Where did it come from? Did it come from a pro-Russian source? A disgruntled Ukrainian source? Who the fuck knows? Speaking to reporters during a visit to Azerbaijan on Monday, Lavrov doubled down on Moscow's long-stated claims that the West was involved. Quote, "It is clear that to carry out such a terrorist attack, there was a command from the very top, as they say. The very top of the West is, of course, Washington," Lavrov told Izvesta newspaper in a video interview published on its Telegram channel. Lavrov, however, did not present clear evidence for his claims, and I think that may lie the problem. You can make a lot of claims, but if you can't back it up with some evidence, like the previous articles seem to have done, the Wall Street Journal, being the one I'm referring to, keeps making the same claims based on a report that they have got about this Ukrainian guy. Do we know where they got the report from? I don't know. You could spend a long time trying to track that down. So for the purposes of this show, let's say they have fact-checked and done everything right and got the information from a credible source and it's being verified, and let's say that this Ukrainian team is responsible, because that seems to be the narrative that keeps popping up over and over again, and that's also what the German report suggests and the UN one, but it's all based off of the Wall Street Journal. Mr. Lavrov, on the other hand, doesn't seem to have much evidence. He's more or less just made a statement without providing any type of evidence or any type of clue. But that doesn't mean he's not making a point or talking complete bullshit, because the US has been involved in these type of things before, and you can't rule out that the CIA or some other ABC agency or the military isn't responsible. I'm not saying they are. This is purely hypothetical, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was a US element involved. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot of planning went into it. There had to be some training, obviously. Underwater demolition teams or someone like that would have to have been consulted at the very least. You would need divers, underwater demolition teams, which is a very small pool, Navy SEALs, Royal Marines, Australian Navy divers. There's a handful of naval units around the world that could probably pull that off. Obviously, I don't know the whole catalogue of naval or military underwater demolition teams, but you get what I'm saying. It'd be a very small talent pool, is what I'm trying to say. He said there, quote, "were attempts to blame everything on a group of drunken officers, something he branded not serious." Okay, so what drunken officers is he referring to? The US had no immediate response to Lavrov's latest assertion, but has previously dismissed Russian suggestions of its involvement. There's also a video about the alleged diver.
Who or what destroyed these pipelines 2 years ago? Those have been central questions for German investigators for many months. We know they've identified 4 divers seen near the spot at the time as being of particular interest. It's believed the authorities are working on the basis that this ship was used to transport the 4 to and from the site. It was raided by German police last year. In June this year, they issued an arrest warrant for one of the 4 divers, a Ukrainian called Volodymyr Z, who was living in Poland, and asked the government in Warsaw to arrest him. But he managed to cross into Ukraine in early July because Polish officials say the Germans didn't put his details on the database in time. The Nord Stream
Convenient.
pipelines were once an important route for Russian gas to enter Western Europe. But the combination of sanctions once war began and then the sabotage itself stopped that permanently. If a Ukrainian was proved to have been involved, then it could well damage the relationship between Kyiv and Berlin. President Zelensky has been to the German capital several times since Russia invaded his country. Germany has been the largest EU donor of financial, humanitarian and military aid to Kyiv. Its Leopard 2 tanks are an important part of the Ukrainian arsenal, and German missiles have helped stem Russian attacks. Which is why senior officials here say, although the investigations into the destroyed pipelines are of the highest priority, they also say these developments will not change their relationship with Ukraine. Dominic Kane, Al Jazeera, Berlin.
Interesting. So if he asked the Polish authorities, or the German, whatever it said in that clip, to arrest him, why the fuck would he do that? Why would he willingly want to be arrested, but then disappear across the border before that could happen? And then the Germans didn't enter his name into a database in time. I find that a little suspicious. I find that a little unlikely. But very interesting nonetheless, and it's just another layer of confusion on this story. It at least seems like there's a deliberate effort to make it as confusing and as convoluted as possible, so we will never ever find out who was responsible. Continuing with the article. Russian President Vladimir Putin has previously suggested that the US was responsible for the attack, which Moscow has repeatedly described as sabotage. They're pretty right in saying that. It's obviously sabotage. I don't think it was an accident. I don't think an accident would have destroyed, as I said before, all 3 pipelines like that. The Wall Street Journal reported that Ukraine's top military commander at the time, Zal, oversaw the plan to blow up the pipelines used by Russia to deliver gas to Europe. The paper claimed that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky approved of the plan, but tried to stop it after the US CIA told him they were aware of the plans and warned against it. On Wednesday, Poland confirmed that it had received a German arrest warrant for a Ukrainian man who was reportedly a suspect over the attack. On Wednesday, Poland confirmed it had received a sharp pressure drop on the pipelines under the Baltic Sea was registered on September 26, 2022, and seismologists detected explosions triggering a wave of speculation about who sabotaged the multi-billion-dollar project that carried Russian gas to Germany. No one has claimed responsibility for the blast, which occurred off the Danish island of Bornholm and ruptured 3 out of the 4 lines of the system. End of article.
G'day. Don't skip. Let me interrupt the podcast that you're currently listening to with some blatant self-promotion. What do you get when you mix 2 Aussie mates, a splash of booze, well, more than a splash, and some microphones? You get Cheers Big Ears, hosted by myself, the Chad, and my mate, Matt, and sometimes, but more often than not now, my missus, Bobby. It's a podcast of adult beverages and not-so-adult conversation. It's not serious, far from it. Well, except for that one episode, but that was just that one. We're available wherever you get your podcast fix. Cheers, Big Ears.
Very fucking interesting. I don't know about you, but I think I'm more confused now than I was when I started this. Who's to blame? The Russians are claiming it was the US, but there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that they were involved. I mean, it's highly likely. It's completely probable, as I've mentioned before. But why? They've already put sanctions and restrictions on Russian imports and exports that would restrict their economic reach. So why blow up a pipeline and risk getting caught and starting World War III? Because if there was direct evidence the US were involved, pretty sure Russia wouldn't take that too kindly. The same way Putin has warned against American-made missiles being fired into Russia or weapons that would constitute an act of war and could lead to a nuclear provocation, which wouldn't be good for anybody. And yeah, as I mentioned, it's completely probable that the US was involved, but to me anyway, it doesn't really seem likely. It doesn't seem like they'd have anything to gain by doing that except potentially triggering a nuclear world war. And I think what those articles keep suggesting is probably the likely outcome. And I'll say it again, this is completely hypothetical. I have no proof for or against anything on this show. I'm just chucking these ideas out there because it's fun to speculate and theorize sometimes. That's what I always liked about conspiracy theories. There's just so many angles you can go down. Just when you think you've got one thing figured out, it's that whole mystery element. Something contradicts that or doesn't make sense, and then you got to look for another answer. And just when you look into that, you think you figured it out, and it gets more confusing and more layered and more convoluted. Anyway, who do you think was behind it? Do you think it was the Russians sabotaging their own pipelines to frame the US or the Ukrainians? I don't think that's particularly likely, given the economic loss. Do you think it was the Ukrainians? Do you think it was a pro-Ukrainian group? Was it the Germans? Was it the Vikings? Was it the US? Or was it penguins? Who the fuck knows? So what do you think? And that brings us to the end of the show. A big thank you to everyone who listened to the end. If you'd like to support the Truth Tank, there's a couple of things you can do. Head on over to the Facebook and Instagram page, give them a follow and a like, share them around with anyone you think might like the show. You can download and listen to your favourite episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Castbox, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell anyone you think might like the show. Help spread it around and get the word out there. If you feel so inclined, I'd be much appreciated if you left a 5-star rating and review on your favourite podcast player. Every review and rating helps the show grow. Once again, a big thank you to everyone who listened to the end, and I'll be back in the next week or two with a brand new episode. But until then, I'm the Tank. This is the truth. Truth to tell.